Danny, great to be with you again, my friend. You know what? We didn't do our shows this past week, and I got so many phone calls. Are you okay? Is Danny okay? When is Danny coming back? So here you are, my friend. It's good to see you.
We're back.
It's holiday, so, the landing's not open all the time.
And I don't know what the temperature is, Phil. You and I have got shorts. I got flip-flops on, t-shirts, Where in the world can you go? We're right here at 22nd Street. We could hop on a boat and catch bluefin tomorrow. I mean...
In the wintertime.
In the winter. It does not get
Christmas.
any better. So you Buddha heads, for your sashimi for New Year's, no excuse, pal. Get your behind out on a boat. Go catch a couple of them. You're set. You and your relatives, you got all the bluefin you need for shogatsu. So get on down, get on a boat, and who knows how many times this will happen in the future. But these fish aren't going anywhere. There's a biomass of squid and bait out there that they don't need to go back to Japan and stuff. I've contended that for years. There's a lot of them that stay on the bank. They put their noses down in the mud, eat the squid. There's enough, biomass of chovies, sardines, and squid from here all the way down to like Colonet through there and offshore islands, high spots. They're not going anywhere.
Danny, you just used the term Buddha head. Is that a pejorative? Is that a bad thing to say?
You know what?
What's the origin? What does it
it's
mean exactly?
It's kind of a slang. It's a Japanese thing for, your fellow Japanese guys.
Right.
I think a lot of...
So is it appropriate for me to say it?
Oh, yeah.
As opposed
to... you know why it is?
Or is it your fellow Japanese?
No. It's fine. It's pretty much endearing for people. It tells you that you probably grew up in Southern California around that, right?
I mean, because nowadays everybody's so sensitive, right?
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to start putting the big boy pants on a little bit. We ran boats. You get a little thicker skin, and you kind of laugh it off. And it's too bad society can't do that. Now they get butthurt over every little thing, and they got to get over that. Otherwise you're gonna be a basket case.
Yeah. I have never been a big one in letting someone else control my emotions. So if somebody else says something stupid about my race or another race or whatever, and it's racist or whatever it is, you think I'm going to give that guy control over how I feel? I'm going to dismiss him as a moron and move on with my life.
Yeah.
As opposed to, he's destroyed my life by saying blah, blah. We're getting off on another tangent.
But that has something to do with it. I mean, it's kind of a segue into Yo. I'm pretty sure
Yo Yoshida. We're going to talk about Yo.
Yo was in the 442nd, which was an all Japanese American
during
battalion.
World War II.
Yeah, and they're to this day, the most decorated unit in U.S. history.
So Yo, people they're going. Who
my
the heck
uncles,
is
I had
Yo?
uncles in there, So. Yeah, so we're very pro-American.
People are asking, who is Yo? We're going to talk a little bit about Yo Yoshida's Yo's Tackle in Gardena. Who was he? Tell us a little bit about his background.
Yo was a veteran.
Yeah.
But, like a lot of guys, and particularly, and you and I talk about this quite a bit, Phil. The South Bay was rich. You guys were in Redondo. There was also next to Yo's, there was Arts Tackle. It was very competitive. You had all the same type of fishing mines. Right next to Arts was Russ Izor, the inventor, the guy that brought out Spectra to this fishing world. So you talk about the innovative ideas that came out of a close-knit area, the South Bay, and in Gardena with Yo. Yo was famous for his custom rods. It was facilitated by the fact that Leon, Saber and CalStar was down the street in Gardena. Daiwa was headquartered originally down in Gardena. So the influx and influence of the fishing industry was pretty huge.
And Yo played a very important role in that.
Making custom rods, I can remember even in high school, my dad saying, why do you need all these? And I fished with my grandparents. My grandpa had a set of rods that we'd use for different things. But I went as far as having a 12-pound rod for bluefin, 15, a longer rod for 20, a shorter rod for 20 for albacore, specialty rods, and they would just look and go, you really need those bundles, all those bundles, and I think it was in the 90s when I started rep Gary Loomis with Gary. Gary came into my garage, and there was literally, Phil, about 80 CalStars and experimental rods from other manufacturers. I fished pretty much exclusively all Leon stuff when I was running the boat on the Mustang. And a lot of those prototypes didn't make it. And also Dave Myers and Vic Cutter over at Fenwick down at Huntington Beach. So, once again, we're blessed by having this influx of Southern California innovators and manufacturers. And Fenwick at that time, as you remember, they owned the freshwater market. They were very strong, and they were close to doing the saltwater until the light Pacific, I think it was, but they started the S-Class. They had problems with, and that kind of hurt them. But it still came back to the hub at the time was probably Gardena. So the input and so much of that came out of there.
Yo and Ruthie, his wife, were out on a fishing trip with you that you'll never ever forget. You ought to tell everybody about that.
Okay. So, with Yo, you got a great group of fishermen, number one, And so we're out on an albacore trip, and we start picking away.
You're running the Mustang?
I'm running the Mustang.
Yeah.
And it's starting to get late. Well, Ruthie, his wife, hangs a big eye. It was mixed albacore with big eyes. She hangs a big eye. And generally, barring anybody else, I shouldn't have made an exception. You give them a time limit and say, you know what, we got to hit it. I got to kick it for home now so we can get to the barn on time, to pick up our new group. And this had to be, I think, 84, because I had the lease on Islandia in 84, 85, and 86. And so we're in this stop, and I'm looking at and Ruthie hung this big eye out of all these albacore on a prototype rod. So now I've got even more pressure, because Leon takes care of me. Got a prototype, CalStar. I don't know if it was Sabre back then, before it was CalStar, but he's got this prototype rod that Ruthie hung this fish on. Well, Yo ends up taking over. And I've never seen anything like this. Yo's crew, and typical Southern Cal, it could only happen here. They were taking the side plates, rebuilding, putting new drags in, another side plate, and they would hold the spool. And you know how Jigmaster is, you pop it out, pop it back on.
Yeah.
Well, now you got new drags. So it's like an Indy pit stop.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never seen it. The first time I've ever seen that.
That's crazy.
And that came out of Yo's crew. I think, who was that? I can't exactly remember, but he had tremendous crew. Guys that worked for him and friends. And then I had guys where we were on the deck and stuff. They'd go up in the wellhouse, and since we had that sonar, when it was getting dark, and I let it go way too long, but it was on an experimental rod. It was Yo and Ruthie, and I'm going, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Well, they're up in the wellhouse shooting down, tracking this fish. It's at 40 feet, blah blah blah. We end up losing the fish, and it's pitch dark. I have all the. I'll bring back the photos. I have them here, but it's not real clear because it's got the plastic on the outside, right? And we're 2 hours late getting in.
Oh no!
And I'm going, oh my God, my poor crew, my group.
That's waiting for you.
That's waiting for me is upset, and rightly so. It was my fault. I'll take the heat for it, And so we're 2 hours late getting out, and I did it because of Yo and Ruthie, right?
You're probably getting out around midnight or something.
It was late. We were 2 hours behind the fleet. So you're talking 20 miles.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So now I'm kicking myself in the behind. It's all my fault, And I got to tell you, the good Lord was looking after me, because that overnight, those fish moved in 20 miles. When we put the jigs out, we got hammered, and we never moved. And the fleet actually, by the time I called our co-boats and our guys, the whole fleet started working back in. So you don't know what's going to happen. But, I know that it was my fault. I should have never done that, should have made the exceptions, because normally you say, okay, you got 15 minutes and we got to kick it. But because it was Yo, and he was a good friend, and, they chartered my boat, I allowed it. But, I was blessed by that. And it makes for a story, 40 years later?
Wow.
So,
I know.
And it's something that not a lot of people know about, except the guys that were there.
Yeah.
They remember that. So it was pretty, my crew,
I was a slash pinhead deckhand on the Searcher during those days, and Yo would come out every Monday, maybe it was. I can't remember. And I remember him, tell me if I have this right, because I was a kid, and this is like 50 years ago almost.
Yep.
But I remember him being an extremely humble guy, very down to earth, wanted to teach me about how to catch bluefin because I was picking his brain. I would watch him catch these fish, watch how great he was at it. I wanted to learn, and he wanted to share the information. Do I have him?
You got it right. You got it.
Yeah.
Danny had a nucleus of great guys around him. You know, all the guys that worked, that were in there, brought great input. I mean, you look at. I know of a number of blanks probably came directly out of that shop, like 270 lights for fishing bluefin, for fishing 12 and 15 pound, you know. So I had my 270 light with my tricked out 146 with a newel, you know. Well, you know, that was, at the time that was state of the art. But, you know, things evolved, the way he cut the rods, the way he custom made it to each person's physique and strength, and, you know, that changed a lot, you know, with custom rods. But at that time, you know, we're just blessed to be around a lot of great fishermen. You look at guys like Jimmy Lou came out of that shop, right? Jimmy's what, maybe 110 pounds sopping wet. And I do not know of a better fisherman I've ever fished with in my life.
And another super nice guy.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And Jimmy and I, we go back and forth because we're such old friends. But Jimmy fished with two different groups on the Mustang with me, Wally's and Boschi's, my partners. And he would come on the boat every Sunday. His tackle box was on the right side engine hatch, you know, and he'd be out on the very corner. So the minute he got on the boat, I'd walk over to his box. I'd open the box, and in the right-hand corner, he had a new bait or something new every single week.
What he was trying
How many
to.
anglers do we have that had that dedication?
Yeah, no.
Innovator. You know, Jimmy weighs maybe 110 pounds, sopping wet.
Right.
He was one of the first guys to get one of these big cows, 300-pound cows, on a single speed.
Wow.
You know, and
because it's technique, isn't it?
it's technique.
It's not brute strength.
No, it's not.
Because you see those
It's all
muscle-bound
technique.
guys,
Yeah.
and they get their butts kicked.
Well, Jimmy's like I said, he's maybe 110 pounds, you know, wet, sopping wet.
Yeah.
One of the best fishermen I've ever seen in my life. Still is. You
Yeah.
know? And we have so many funny stories. It's not even funny. I don't know if we mentioned that in one of the prior deals, but we used to have a stigma when we were bass fishing on catching catfish when you're bass fishing. Well, this one guy, a good friend, caught a bass at Casitas, and he keeps it. And we're going, what the heck is that? We don't keep anything, you know. We
Yeah.
only keep the bass. You know, we'll weigh him and take pictures unless you're going to have it mounted or something, which we did quite a bit back then, unfortunately. But he keeps this bass in his partner goes, what? I mean, this catfish. He goes, what are you doing? And he doesn't say anything. They drive into the ramp at Casitas, takes it up, weighs it up at the tackle shop at Lake Casitas.
Yeah.
And then what happened was, you know, it goes into Western Outdoor News. But when he went up to to get it weighed, you know, and they said, "What's his name? What's your name?" He said, "Taka Tanaka," right? So it comes out in Western Outdoor News. And, you know, remember they had Whoppers of the Week.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
20-pound catfish, Taka Tanaka. Well,
And tell everybody who Taka was.
Oh, Taka was my mentor. He's the one that, you know, I got the Mustang from, that taught me pretty much everything I knew on the, you know, and I was blessed to be around a lot of these great guys, Taka, George Meehl, Russ Izor. You know, we came up amongst a group of just great mentors, right? And their methodologies and their mentalities are what I gravitated to, and of course we all take a different, you know, we have things that we interject ourselves, obviously. Yeah. But no, it was just a great time being around all these great people, you know. But Taka's blaming me for this incident. I said, I didn't have anything to do with it, right? Later on, Jimmy Lou, and I don't know if that was Yo's group, but I think that might have been Wally's, another group. But one of our guys, he actually fished out of Yo's, Harold Oldfield. Harold machined out this one reel seat, you know, and Yo built the rod for it, custom rod, and it had the International built into it. into this reel seat. So it was like one piece, a uni-piece between the rod and everything. Yo coordinated, did the rod. Well, we got into a big eye bite. And I know I watched Harold back there throwing a Dean, and the big guys were right on the corner. They're on the Mustang. We were in like a 5-hour stop on these things. And I turn around, and Harold's got no rod, and I'm going, you have got to be kidding. But Harold was another one of the guys, an innovator, to take and machine out a reel seat where you take the frame off the International and put it onto the reel seat. These are the kind of guys that we were blessed to be around, Phil. These guys were true innovators. Unfortunately, that one's at the bottom of the ocean, unless it got towed around by this big eye that we had. But I mean, just great guys. But we'd also mess around a lot. We play around a lot, and that gets to the Jimmy Lou catfish stop. So there was a stigma with a lot of us guys all bass fish during the week, including all the San Diego skippers. So it was, you think competitive on the San Diego Bay, it was even more cutthroat when you got the Casitas, Castaic, or any of the San Diego lakes.
Really?
Oh yeah, between all the captains. Oh yeah, it was huge. So that's another area that drove us with technology and methodology. We were always tweaking, looking for new ways to get an edge on each other, and most of it technically, with tackle and things like that. Sometimes with methodology, the way you're working your baits and things like that, or conceiving, and figuring out, where the fish bite, by the structure on the lakes. And there's a lot of things that we did too. Like we had, I got a hold of aerial shots of these lakes before they were filled. So, you have to sit there and you're looking at the structure, looking which way the inflow of water's coming in from Castaic and these different lakes, figuring out where the current breaks were and everything. And so it's like reading the ocean, where do you fish at Cortez or Tanner? What end of the bank? Well, where's the current coming from? So it was a factor on the lakes that 99% of the bass fishermen never had an idea about, And so it's fishing with respect to that, with structure, okay, like we did on the ocean. That's why a lot of the San Diego captains that bass fish also had an edge too, when they came out in the lakes.
Makes
and it
sense.
helped us.
Yeah.
But all this came about from a lot of these guys here in the South Bay. Yo's, Arts, you had Jerry's over in Redondo. I mean, but it was just our mentality down here, and I've always credited the influx of that to the people coming out of aerospace. You have people, JPL, Caltech, you got Hollywood, but our fishermen here do not settle. And when you go into a tackle shop like Yo's or Arts and Jerry's and these guys, you're dealing with guys that they're on the top of their game. And if you have the smarts to listen to what they're saying and work on that input that they give you, now you have real innovation. That's where you get guys like Russ Izor, with Spectra. Who would have thought? I know a lot of the guys that put their thumbs down on Russ when he came out with the Spectra. Well, I can remember fishing, and I'll bring that in one of these days. We'll do a show on that. I'm going to look in my shed. I think I have some of the original 3 and 4 carrier Spectras, just 3 strands. So I can't tell you how crude it was, how it would kind of cut your finger. I wish I would have saved some of the original Kevlar that Russ had before he played with the Spectra. The Kevlar worked in the same respect, but it was abrasive. So you'd cut, I'm winding my line in my bass rod, and all of a sudden I look down, the line's kind of pink, and I go, where did this pink stuff come from? And I'm looking, my finger's bleeding, right? I'm going, all right, Russ, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it had the same type of properties, only it was abrasive, But you think about where all this came from. These guys are the true innovators, the guys that don't settle. And I can remember Russ catching a lot of heat. And when we unleashed it, Spiderwire sponsored it, and I can remember doing the promotions in Dallas when going to the shows down there and doing all that, and seeing so many guys say, "Nah, we're never going to use that stuff." Blah,
Like,
blah, blah.
do you remember anybody?
I know a lot of guys.
Do you want to say any names?
No, I won't say the names. There are a few long range guys.
Like
would say,
top captain type guys?
Yes. And they say, I would never use that stuff. It cuts through anchor lines and blah, blah, blah. And guess what? I get to walk by them because I know the history. I get to walk by and say, it's kind of nice you don't have to throw a rod and reel overboard anymore, or put a guy in a skiff and chase, off the boat and have to chase them down like they used to do in the old days. So much liability in that. But it changed the game.
Danny, tell everybody, because I know we have some new guys who are listening. They're wondering what on earth is Danny talking about, throwing a rod and reel overboard?
Well,
what used to happen?
You think about the amount of mono you have, okay, when you're fishing 80, 100-pound mono on an international 50, okay, or even a 50 wide. And that thing would get spooled in a heartbeat, okay? And
on big yellowfin or
on
whatever.
Big yellowfin.
Yeah.
And I can't even tell you what the capacity was, I forget because it's been so long. But, having the availability to pack on probably 5 times more line and have the same strength, also have, less stretch, so you're not getting that mush, huge attribute.
So you'd get down to where you're getting spooled. What would happen? The crew would do what?
You're right. So when you get down on the mono, what they would do is put a clip to another backup, hopefully even heavier line, 130 or something, or whatever, and that would go over too. And so you had your first rod and reel hanging out there 100 yards or however it been, and they lost a few. They lost a few outfits.
Right?
They lost a few outfits.
Yeah.
But here's the blessing of the Spectra. We've never had to do that, then or now. And we've got the one guy, Russ Izor, to thank for that. So, it's amazing the talent, the mentality that came out of, our South Bay. I'm very proud of all our guys. I think one of the biggest things that changed sport fishing for all of us was Carl Newell. And I think I mentioned this before. Phil, I may have talked about this going as a kid to a show and at first Fred Hall. It was still at the Great Western Center in LA. And I went into the pen booth. And I don't know if you guys are probably too young for this, but when you bought a Jigmaster in the old days, number one, it was about $12. But it came with plastic spool and a metal spool.
Right.
Plastic spool, which was castable, we kind of had to back it and cushion it with string. So what would happen is, when you tighten up mono on it, it would spread the spool and just pop and just lock up the reel. You lose your fish. Then you had a metal spool, which unless you had a 1-pound jig, you couldn't cast it, And so it was pretty much useless unless you're, say, trolling with it, And, a lot of us, it was very tough. So I can remember going to my first show as I was pretty young and going into a pen booth, and they had factory people, and I said, is there anything you can do about these plastic spools? They implode, the minute we catch a tuna with it or bluefin, and the metal spool you can't cast. And their answer to me wasn't right.
Wasn't satisfactory.
It was not satisfactory.
What was their answer?
He says,
whoever this guy was, it was just a guy working in the booth?
He was from the factory, from Philadelphia.
Oh.
You see, so they don't get it, right? They didn't get it. He's from the East Coast.
Yeah.
They didn't understand the fishery. And his answer was, we sell every reel we make. We're not changing our tooling for you guys in Southern Cal. So as you know, later on down the line, in fact, he's a very good friend of Russ Izor's too, was Carl Newell up in Glendale. And, when we popped those aluminum spools, now you had something that's stronger than the steel, but lighter and stronger than plastic, when you never had to worry about imploding. Well, that changed the game. But that would just retrofit all the pen side plates. And then later on you had guys, because of the people in aerospace here in Southern California, you had all these engineers and stuff that fished that would put a CNC program together and machine out aluminum side plates. Well, guess what? Bingo. Here's the start of a whole new generation of reels, which we, and it just grew from that. Out of that came the Accurates, the Pro Gears, and this, the that. It exploded. But I credit our mentality here in Southern California for driving that, because we don't settle. And kind of did that with the bass market too. There's things that I wanted that weren't there, but when we went to certain companies, We're blessed to have some of the, like early Shimano reels and Daiwa reels that were able to do. It started with the Lew's Speed Spool, where it enabled us to fly line a super light crawdad on our lakes impoundments down here in Southern California. And before it was Ambassador, I started out, it was all Ambassadors. But it was very difficult to fly line a crawdad that far. And back then in high school and stuff, I was fishing artificials. I was doing like, the tournament guys on TV, fishing straight artificial. I should make my own spinner baits. But even with baits like that, my spinner baits, I would take tuna wire, make my own spinner bait, and I can remember using sample ball bearing tools before the industry did. Before the industry put ball bearings in spinner baits, package made spinner baits.
Wow.
So, we would tweak it. And that's just our mind,
You talk about all this innovation that was going on in those days. Is it still going on?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You look at the people that we fish with, and I walk on the boat, and there's a much younger generation on there, and you can see these guys where their heads at. Same deal. They don't settle for anything. They're going to tweak it. They're going to make their own to improve it. And that's what we have here that you don't see too many other places in the world. The only place I've seen some of the innovation like this maybe in Japan, in some of the boardrooms, and we're negotiating, doing some of the early fluorocarbons and things like that. Spectras, even the guys that took Russ's idea with Spectra now, and they're doing it, like, for instance, Touray sat in a boardroom there and went on a tour, and I saw things that I've never seen here. I saw a machine that looked like a drill press that fuses Spectra together, and I'm looking at it and going, oh my God, how much does it lose when you fuse it together? It looked like a drill press and was heated to a certain temp, but you couldn't even tell that it was fused. And he says, no, what do you mean lose pressure there? It doubles in strength. I'm going, wow, But there's some mentalities and things that you see. I'll do a show one day online, Phil, and I was just going through my deal on different fluorocarbons and spectras and things like that. And then I also found this thing that I think is absolutely disastrous, but they're prepared for it over there in Japan. Was they had a biodegradable line, which I hope we never have to use, because I don't know what it's still in the package. I didn't do any strength tests or anything, but I hopefully will never have to do that. But it worries me because I think we all saw this week. They were talking about instituting, this is more on the East Coast, a 10 mile an hour or 10 knot speed limit on the ocean because of the right whales. Okay, so I don't know how many right whales you've seen at Casitas or Castaic or anything else, but they were talking for all impoundments and offshore for, these right whales, and it's mainly on the East Coast. But, let's stay tuned to that, see what other kind of moronic thing they can find out and do that makes no sense for 99% of the people, and that includes Coast Guard boats. Come on, what do you do in an emergency?
Yeah, right.
I went to 2 fires on the Mustang, and taking people off, in fires. And I had those throttles all the way up, and I pushed it down. And in the case of the Mascot, they were fishing half day along the coast of Point Loma, and we were just bringing the Mustang down for our season. It was in June.
You're coming from
Mustang, and I see smoke, and I go, what's that? And I had Frank Redlew, Mike Redlew's dad, with me. He was another one of those unsung heroes that any time of the night, if we had a problem with Morse controls, and all the boats had Morse controls, he would come down and help you with everything. We were blessed to be around guys like Frank Redlew too.
Yeah.
So anyway, Frank's standing next to me. He says, "Oh, that's got to be those stinking Caterpillar engines and the dry stacks on the Mascot." And I go, "No, that looks funny, So I kick it up, and sure enough, by the time we got there, there's a helicopter hovering. Brian was a young kid, Kirihara, and
he was with you,
he was with me.
Yeah,
he was with me, and we were taking a boat down there. And we're going to leave the boat, go back, get our stuff, and then come back down and start running our season. But yeah, we just got the boat out of dry dock. Mustang was sparkling,
Yeah.
And here we are going up against the Mascot like this, taking these people off, and telling people, no, you leave the rod and reels, leave your tackle boxes, and we're just grabbing the people, getting them on board. And of course, Brian was real young, and all the girls they're all hanging on him, and okay, come on, let's go, let's get everybody out.
Yeah.
It was funny, but I mean, We
And
had
did
just
the
gone-
boat burn? What happened?
Well,
to the boat?
we just got done with our Coast Guard inspection, so all our fire extinguishers were just renewed, recharged.
Oh,
We ended up firing every single one of them off, and the mascot had dry stacks. They had caterpillars, but the dry stacks were on fire. And I think it went down to our last extinguisher before they got it out.
so
But
you
we
guys
had
were the first
helicopters.
on scene?
Yeah, we were the first ones on scene.
Wow.
We had helicopters over us, the whole deal, and we ended up bringing the people back to H&M, and offloading them. But yeah, it's been an amazing adventure.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
And you mentioned another fire. Was there another one?
I took the people. Well, we were stood by the tornado when they had one.
Oh, okay.
Because I can't remember what year that was, but I know that there was God, we were headed out to Santa Barbara. It was during the wintertime.
Yeah.
And Tornado had one in their engine room, and so we were standing by. But they got it out, but we were tied up next to them.
Yeah.
So but when it comes down to it, we're all in it together. We're all friends. We're all as competitive as we may get. When it comes down to life and death, guess what? There's no question.
Yeah, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
we'll do whatever we got to do. Yeah.
You talked about that innovation. Your father actually got involved. If I have this right, you were up in the wheelhouse and there was a glare on the sonar and you couldn't see it. And you're like, there's got to be something we can do about this.
Once again, Southern California, mentality, right? What it was my code boat, George Mayo here, the new hustler. We worked together. He and I worked together. And he was the first one to put he was usually implementing black and white scanning sonars, but when the color came out, he got it, and I was on the boat, and I would second for him a lot of times during the week, and I looked at the unit, and I said, wow, that's unbelievable. So when I got the Mustang, that was the first thing we put on. We didn't say anything, it was the first year it came out, and just so I think the experience with George was prior to getting the boat, So when I got the Mustang, first thing I did was, and it just so happened it was the first year, that color scanning sonar. So George and I kept it real quiet. We put them on. And we put them on right here at San Pedro Boat Works. We hauled it out there, put it on, and it was a game changer, right? But we kept it kind of quiet. What that sonar did was a lot of things. It gave us, being able to see what you have in your fringe. So instead of straight lining and trolling out with albacore feathers, you get a spot and you're doing these squiggles and then you stop. Throw bait on it and you stop. That also helped bridge a lot of the gap between the San Diego and San Pedro fleets, because it was a northern boat, southern boat thing,
That still
and
goes
we were
on,
not,
doesn't
and
it?
I think it's more groups have gotten together,
Yeah, right.
And we got to realize that we're one industry. We're not individual groups. It's great for our own thing, but in those early days, to break that barrier down, that's kind of what it took, is to go down to San Diego and kick them in the behind. But we had great fishermen. We were blessed with that. We had top tackle shops around, and just the great mentality of our fishermen. Like I said, a lot has to do with the technology. So we were blessed by that. But then you give them the best electronics and the best service from your crew, and then we were blessed with that too. Because I remember we were one of the first guys at that time, back in those days, with every one of my crew members were captains, including that 1 year Fran Kennedy. She had her license. We got her to get her license too. And Fran, to this day, still has a world record albacore that she caught with. I put her on Russ boat with the first string in '84 when those big fish were in the channel. She got a 75 pounder on 20 pounds.
Oh my God! And that's still a record.
That's still a record.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is she still around?
I haven't seen her in years. I hope she is, but yeah, no, she brought a lot of fire to that too, even in the galley. Taught her to make fried rice.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a great time. Great time.
When's the last time you went bass fishing? And do you miss it?
Well, I do, and we now, instead of running around 70 miles an hour, we get a pontoon, and we do more laps, eat more food, and we still catch some fish. We go out with a bunch of friends. And
do you do the crawdad thing?
We did. We didn't bring too many crawdads up. No, we didn't. We fished some live shad with Rich Tauber's outfit. We fished one day at Casitas and one day at Kachuma. But it was just a blast. You know, the pontoon fishing now, we're not serious. It's for the laughs and
Yeah.
just the camaraderie and stuff.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it does bring back days like I can remember in high school going up there, and even some of the early days on the Mustang with Tonka and Katie, where we'd go out to Kachuma and rent a boat. And even in high school, I had the green Lowrance green box, so we were already, you know, ahead of the gang with technology because Carl Lawrence, his dad, built that green box. They called it the green box. So you had to bring your battery, your own trolling motor, put it on a rental boat, and then back then we were fishing all straight crank plugs. We made our own spinner baits. We were buying plastic worms, and you know, hand pours were very popular. That came out of another thing out of Southern Cal, you know, and I can remember what started the bait fishing was one of my fishing partners, Freddie Chikawa. Taka and Freddie and I would fish together, and we'd fish all crank plug spinner baits, everything, artificials during the day, and all of a sudden at lunchtime we'd sit down, plop out the one anchor on the bow, and Freddie would bring a dozen crawdads, maybe a couple mudsuckers. There was a bait shop called Sims down here in Seal Beach, right? And we'd be eating our lunch, and for this 45 minutes or so that we're eating lunch, we're catching our biggest bass on live bait. And I'm thinking about it now. We're throwing cranks, arms are getting sore, you know, spinner baits, plastic worms, all this stuff, and we're catching fish. We're doing it bass fishing style, tournament style, right? And we're pretty darn good at that because we're very competitive, right? And we're getting these bigger fish in this 45 minutes that we're eating our lunch with the live baits and on one anchor. So then we started thinking about it, you know, and we started fishing some of the baits. But what facilitated that was some of the tackle now. Some of the graphites came out, you know, Fenwick was supplying me with, you know, some of the first HMGs and things like that. So you can get the feel. I can remember going from Ambassadors, it was tough to fly line a crawdad. It didn't have the free spool. Let's say the first Bantam 100s, the Lose Spee Spoo, that was probably the first to lose. And then the Divas came out with some great reels. Once again, Southern Cal, you know, but we were able to fly line these small baits, and now we're catching these bigger fish. Well, what that did, when you're fishing more than one person, we had to double anchor. So you're not spinning around on anchor, right? Now we're noticing, oh, there's a current going here. It's going this way. So we have to readjust our anchoring and everything. Well, what do we do when you're at Catalina or Cortez or current determines where you fish. You know, this is one of the key things. This is going to be a show in itself too, is determining the current and impacting the way it drove us to go after these big fish. It's not any different than going out to Tanner and Cortez. Oh, do you just plop it in the middle of the bank? No, you want to be on a leading edge where the bait's coming into the, you know, the structure, and that followed through on the lakes, and it came, you know, very true on the lake. So that's why we saw a lot of the great fishermen, even down in San Diego. You know, your Sansom brothers, Ray Monteras, you know, Buzzy, all those guys. It was, like I said, they had that mentality, so it was very easy. Murph, you know, Bob Murphy. A lot of us that fish bait already had that mentality, you know. And that also helped bring a lot of fleets, you know, the Southern Fleet and the Northern Fleet together too, because I remember doing a trip with, you know, I fished with Dave Williams at the time, was running New Luan, and this is when Don Sansom was still with Connie, you know, his wife, and we did a 2-day deal at Castaic, and then Casitas. Started at Casitas, and then we went up, stayed overnight, went up to Santa Barbara. I showed him Kachuma. So those are some of the things that help bridge, you know, that northern southern, you know, brought a lot of us together, you know. And later on, a few years later, John Lloyd, who I think is one of the greatest fishermen around too. I fished with John and Danny Sansom on the American Angler, and we would all share information too on the lake. So, you know, that there's a lot of that really helped bring us together, so which was great.
People who are watching this, I think, would be amazed at the amount of San Diego skippers that love to bass fish, and that's still going on.
Oh yeah, I see guys like Bruce Smith, you know, big on it. A lot of these guys, you know, we were just blessed, and I credit a lot of those big fish we got to. It was timing. It was what we call the first generation of cross between. California had straight northern strain bass here all these years, and they would attain a certain max size, maybe 10 pounds, 12 pounds. When they bought the Florida strain in, it was a whole different ballgame. Their feeding habits, they were a little line shy. They didn't eat the artificials well, and so it took a whole different methodology to catch these fish, and mainly live baits. Like in San Diego, I can remember Danny Sansom flying in shiners this big, fishing them like you would almost they're almost like small mackerel sardines, right? There's a funny story there, because Danny was so serious, he'd fly these baits in, spend a lot of money, bought one of those little portable pools, with aluminum walls about this high, and his brother Don came over. I can remember I died laughing on this one. Don comes over to look at Danny, and they were competitive. I think between the brothers, back in those days, it was $100 a fish over 10 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is between the brothers, right? So we were at dinner, and Don and Connie and Dave Williams were all at dinner. He's telling me the story. So he goes over to see this big pool, aluminum pool, portable pool that Danny bought. It's flying in shiners like this from Florida, right? Don's over there looking, slips, falls, crushes aluminum. These shiners are going down the street, and Danny's ready to kill his brother, right? But I mean, the stories that we get over the years, they're priceless, But so much of the evolution of even crawdad fishing came out of, the sport guys, the sport captains too, because we already understood what current did to the way the fish think, and that was one of the key things. Yeah.
There sure are a lot of characters in this business, aren't there?
Well, that's giving us endless material, Phil.
Yeah, I know.
I could just do a show on all the bass fishing in San Diego and L.A. captains. Oh, what are the guys? Kenny Hess.
Yeah.
Well, one of them, he was here. I can remember. And Kenny and I would sleep in the back of my camper at Casitas, And I can remember in his early days, he went out and he went up there, rented a boat, got a 16-something. And, Kenny's short like me, but we always accused him of, that 16-pounder, him dragging it up and down Gaffey Street, showing it off, and as short as like me, his tail was partly dragging on the ground. But I mean, we laughed so much in those days, but it brought a lot of camaraderie between all the captains and things. But it was competitive. Don't get it wrong. We were very competitive, which drove methodology along with technology too.
Did it get nasty ever? Like with anybody?
No, we're just very competitive. Yeah. Oh, well, God, it was worse between the Sansom brothers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They
were competitive. And you look
beyond
at them,
competitive, it sounds
you look at them, they're great skippers. They were both great skippers. I fished with Don when I was in college. I can remember on the qualifier, up on Uri Hall at UC San Diego, in a chem class, looking down in La Jolla Cove, and I see the qualifier, and I go, I'm going to be there tomorrow. And I have to show you that I have one of the brochures from 1966, and where yellowtail fishing was $12, albacore was $15. So the next day, back then you had to call them to the landing and say, what did they get today? Oh, they had a yellowtail bite. I go, oh, man. So the next day, of course, I didn't tell Dad that, but next day I'd be down there in La Jolla Cove looking up, and I said, that building up there, Uri Hall, I'm supposed to be in that building. I'm supposed to be in a chem class. But it doesn't matter, they're biting.
Everything else goes down the drain when they're biting, right?
Yeah. Yep. Always did.
So looking back, one other guy that you've talked a little bit about today is Russ Izor. He was an outspoken guy, wasn't he? I mean, by that, he didn't hold back. He told you didn't have any doubt how you stood with Russ.
You know what? I loved him. I called him a sea dad. And he didn't pull any punches. And I respected him more than anybody, because he would he also would listen to constructive criticism, and Russ used to fish with me on the Mustang, and this is a true story too. I can remember one day we're at Catalina, and he was way ahead of his time. I'm fishing my bass rods, my short bass rods. I'm fishing lakes with an ambassador and catching calicos. He says, here, Danny, try this. He brings me this long rod, I think with a squidder on it. And he has 15-pound line on it, and I'm fired out. And I stick about a 4.5-pound fish, and I'm starting to bounce, and the line snaps. And I go, Russ, this line is crap. And this is his original Izor line before this first string. And so he goes, "What do you mean it's crap?" I says, "This line breaks right at 15 pounds." And I told him, I said, "You know, Russ, 99% of us don't care if it breaks at 15. What they want is they want a line that's 15 pound that breaks, that they can go down to San Diego and catch a 20-pound bluefin with. They don't know that it mics out and that it breaks at 22 pounds. You know what he did? He went resourced the original Izor line. Immediately, first string came out. I'm still using some of those first batches. Guess what? It's probably 30 years. It doesn't break. It's phenomenal.
You mean this many years later?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm sure they don't want to say that, but I mean, I have some of the line. That trip we did at Tanner with all the boys, the old guys.
Right.
That was from the first batch when he switched manufacturers.
Really?
And went to a copolymer.
Oh my God.
So this is how smart that guy was, and he didn't have an ego. He listened to input. You know, he was one of the first guys to put the sonar on the first string. He was dumping it in the water. He and Donnie Brockman came up and saw me. Donnie had his put on right here at San Pedro Boat Works too. You know, so these guys they understood right away the impact that would have. And it impacted more than just their fishing ability and you know, understanding of what's going on underneath us. It helped bridge a lot of the gap between a lot of the fleets too, which was a huge deal. Because it was pretty standoffish going from one area to the next, but it brought everybody together, you know.
And of course, one of his most important legacies, amongst many, is this ecosystem that's located right off Huntington Beach, Izor's Reef.
You know, that's another one that gripes me. Right here, down the street here, there was a viaduct, concrete viaduct. And when they started to do renovations, they tore all this concrete down. Russ immediately went to Fish and Game and told them, "Why don't you take that out there, put it on a barge and make a reef?" Well, I guess because it wasn't their idea, they boo-hooed the whole thing. So Russ Izor funded it himself, built Izor's Reef. Now you can go out there. Now, not only can you not put gill nets on it because you'll lose your gill nets, but it's its own ecosystem. Squid spawn on it now. It's its own ecosystem. It's phenomenal. So he had so much foresight with a lot of stuff. You know, I respect him more than anybody in this industry, and I miss him dearly.
Is it that it's too costly to do that now? Because I don't see any of that artificial. I guess there's a little bit, but not that much.
I don't think it's as much cost as the mentality, Phil.
Yeah.
You know, now you're going to have some triggers saying, "Oh, you're going to put concrete, it's going to pollute the water." Yeah, right. You know, I mean, that's what we're dealing with now. You know, the lack of common sense.
Yeah.
You know.
Even with the example of you go out, you put that concrete out there, and as you said, there's an ecosystem. There's all these fish.
Phenomenal. And there's enough rebar in there and things like that. They keep the gill netters from putting gill netters on.
Which is great.
Which is perfect.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, they rip their gear all up, so they go somewhere else.
It's not cost effective for them.
Yeah. Some people don't realize that gill nets are still a thing, right? There's some rules about how far out they have to be.
Yeah, and it's I have problems because it's a lot of indiscriminate killing too.
Yeah.
You know, you're not targeting it like you would, like, you know. I mean, it's kind of arrogant of us, but you know, when you're lift pulling an albacore, yeah, it's an albacore. You put your squid down or your live bait and you pop it in. You know what you're harvesting right there.
Yeah.
You know, the gill nets have a indiscriminate killing ability, and that's what makes it different. It makes it dangerous too.
They try to regulate that a little bit by the mesh size, right, on gill nets, but you don't seem convinced that you're still getting non-target fish.
Yeah. I always thought that rod and reeling them, you know, you can control whether if you want to release it, you can release it. You know, you have that opportunity.
What do you think about like squid boats and hand brailing as opposed to dragging all that gear through the habitat and everything?
That's a tough one too.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
That's a tough one too, because you know, we know how important that is.
Yeah,
what are we going to sacrifice on that?
I know.
But at the same time, you got an ecosystem there too.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. You know, because what we've done in the past, in all those years when we ran boats, we used to go to Catalina, and you know, the west end would be lit up like a light bulb. You know, and it was all brailed from the surface. These guys would put the big burls in, and they would get a ton at a time, and so you didn't have any any crossover, catch that what do they call that? But the
bycatch.
Bycatch.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was straight squid that they're scooping and they're floating on the boat. And, for us, it was neat because I worked with some of those guys they were commercial albacore guys during the off season, during the summertime, and then it'd be squid boats during the winter. And it was nice because we had arrangements with several of the Fujikawa brothers where you get over there, and I would bring over sushi, chicken, and shotgun and 22 shells. Okay, and I would pull in, get that. We were first ones to build these big receivers with the big 4-inch PVC. It went down 8 feet, and the receivers that I built would hold a ton. So they would power barrel 2 in that thing. We'd back away, not disturb anything, back away, load all 4 bait tanks. And I did that so my crew could sleep the whole weekend. We'd had enough to fish Catalina, Clemente both days.
Nice.
So the crew could get their sleep at night rather than stay up all night to make squid. So that was a good investment, and we're blessed to be around friends that we had that relationship with. So that was huge. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think we're good, and we're going to be working on some other things, Phil. Right?
Absolutely.
And if we're playing with our formats a little bit and stuff, but yeah. And then we'll have the questions. You guys have any other things? Yo was the last one, but there's so many different ways to go, and been very blessed being around an industry that allowed us to use innovation, to be around a lot of the great people that changed fishing as we know it today.
Absolutely. Are you planning on going fishing before the first of the year?
I'm thinking
you probably get
soon.
tempted into it.
Yeah, I'm getting.
I think the
tempted.
Freedom's going tonight.
Yeah.
The other day when the Pride, you walked in here and I said, hey, the Pride's going tonight. And that was like an hour after our show ended, maybe less. And you're like, I'm in.
How good does that get? I get nailed with my first cast.
Yeah,
and
that's
then you
awesome.
get a choice. I'm fishing beans. I'm old school. But, the guys are getting them on the squid, too. There's apple squid. Get them on the squid. But they're talking about, it was weird. That's something that I've never done. I've never caught one on a live squid. And they were talking about how, I think I'm getting bit on a blue perch. And the bite was different. When you get bit on a dean, it hits the water, takes off, and all of a sudden just changes gears.
Yeah, right.
The squid, these guys are fishing like a calico. They get crunch, go, what the heck is that, a blue perch? And all of a sudden, they wait, and then it starts to slowly move off, and, they'd hit it, and it's a tuna. I go, wow.
That's weird.
But it'd be a learning experience. I've never done that before, so that in itself would be worthwhile.
Danny, always good to have you
all
here.
Right,
the Danny Kadota Show is a huge success. Great to have you as a part of Friedman Adventurers. And
great, Phil. We'll keep it coming.
We'll look forward to seeing you again really soon.
You got it. We'll see you. Bye.